All right, my friend. We are on opposite sides of the world. I'm standing in a beautiful rainstorm right now. You're enjoying some peacefulness, and we're going to get connect together, have a nice little conversation that's going to be fun and also inspire some mindfulness. So, I know we talked a little bit before we hit record about, getting into nature and finding the enjoyment in hiking. I want to start there because it's always good to start off on a fun-filled note. Let's talk a little bit about some of the hiking experience you've had.
Somewhat experience, sorry.
Some of the hiking experiences that you've had.
Well, I mean, I love forests and I love the desert. So it's a strange mix, but both work very good for me. I like to take it slow. Back in the day, I was exploring nature mostly with my dirt bike. This was my like hardcore passion that was part of my identity. So I used to go through nature really fast. And then one day I realized that actually going slow in nature gives you all other sorts of benefits, like stopping and smelling the flower and investigating what's out there. So yeah, anytime I'm outside, just taking it slow, looking at what nature has to offer.
See, that's really become a big part of my hiking practice as well. That just taking your time, enjoying the journey. And for me, it's a lot of mountain hiking, a lot of woodlands as well. So it provides a lot of beautiful opportunities to, smell the flowers around, see what's going on. And also, I find I learn a lot from the animals that I encounter throughout a hike or throughout an adventure. When I'm out and I've run across, especially here where I'm at now, there's a ton of geese that are sitting off in the distance, just kind of enjoying the rainstorm as much as I am. And you learn so much about life and how to just navigate your way through your journey based off of these creatures that don't have the ability to get lost in a story. They don't have the ability to get lost in a label that somebody tells them.
Yeah, yeah. That I think that the reason is they don't cling to anything. Basically, all of these creatures don't have any belongings except for themselves. So, they don't have any persona, they don't have any identity. They're just part of their surrounding. I guess from their point of view, there is no real difference between them and what they experience of nature. So they're like just immersed in nature, immersed in the moment. And for sure, like you said, we have tons of things to learn from them and from nature.
It's one thing that I really find kind of amusing when I talk to somebody, especially on a day like today, where they're like, "Yeah, I'd like to go out, but there's going to be nothing going on, nothing happening." And it really applies a lot to my hunting practices. I love days like today because everybody's caught up in that aspect, but the animals are still out here living. They're experiencing. They're not going to put their lives on hold because it's pouring down rain or maybe it's like negative 20 degrees and a blizzard or whatever. And encountering things like that, I feel like it helps a lot as I navigate through my daily life because we hit the obstacles and the struggles of life and we want to stop and we want to sit around and just wait for them to either blow away or somebody else to come through and take care of them. But when I look out in the field right now and I see these geese going about their daily course of life, it reminds me that even though the obstacles are there, I can find a way to navigate them. I can find a way to make them a part of the journey, a part of the adventure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that what you just said is basically you're taking inspiration from nature. And we as people have been doing that for as long as we can remember ourselves through arts or, through any innovation we come up with. Basically, we look at nature and get inspired. So I would suggest that that's a beautiful practice.
it's something that, really adds a lot of value to the story of life, that each of us are living. And, a lot of us, we overlook it or we take it for granted, but some of us really embrace that story aspect and we turn it into a book, a movie, a podcast, whatever the case may be, to help inspire somebody else along their journey. And that's what I want to kind of shift and transition into a little bit is about the process that you walked in order to do such that very thing with your book.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, as we discussed just before you hit the record, I had a pretty usual childhood, except that I had a lot of mystical experiences, which at the time I didn't know how to think of. Sometimes I thought I was going crazy, but with time it passed. Those experiences and adolescence came about, and then I've become a grown man. And about mid 30s or so, I kind of realized that there's nothing really exciting about life, because I've kind of had it all. Like, I don't mean in a sense that I had all my check boxes and all my goals, but I had a good taste of life, so um, I felt that the mundane reality was a drag, and there was nothing new to explore, and all the exploration that are possible at the time, what at least at the time I thought, that are already been done by others. And I didn't find a lot of taste, a lot of thrill in life. And when this kind of realization really sunk in, I think that kicked off my journey, as you mentioned. And it was really a process of pausing and asking questions that until then didn't seem that relevant in my day-to-day life, like what is the nature of reality, what is this place we call the universe. And the most fundamental question was, who am I? Well, it sounds kind of weird to many people to ask these kind of questions, especially who am I? A lot of people will say, well, my name is so and so, and any other identification they come up with, like I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a CEO. You can play a lot of roles, but when you truly delve in and you start to peel away those identification, you realize that they are all transient, they're all limited. And once I wasn't a father, and now I am a father. So does that defines me as someone who is a father or a husband? Those things come and go. So this took me to a really long journey, and with this journey, a few years back, I wrote a book that is called Behind the Mask, Beyond the Mind, in which I explore all these questions and try to navigate the high water of consciousness, awareness, reality, the big questions of life. And since taking this journey, I find that life is way more profound than I used to believe or used to think of. And it's funny because nothing really changed about the outside world for me. What has changed is my inner world, and I've opened myself up to a really big spectrum of feelings, sensations, and understanding that were veiled by a metaphorical curtain, uh, almost all my life. And yeah, this kind of a journey, I feel a lot of people undertake, especially when they reach a certain age. And I think it's part of our life, and it's a very nice thing to do. I would encourage anyone to try and sit with themselves and ask these profound questions.
See, I think about my journey and a lot of the people that I've worked with, and that going way back to the beginning of that, where you had this question about what is the meaning or what is the purpose and this and that. We all, as weird as it may sound coming out of our mouths, reflecting on it, it's something that we all have to face. A lot of the time, we turn away from it though. We're afraid to answer that question, like as if once we figure out that question, there becomes no other questions at all to ask and find the answer to. So it almost feels intimidating because we're not seeing what's beyond that mountain ridge. And then we get to a point in our life, be it either life circumstances or just out of boredom, where we start to tackle that question and we discover that answer. And the path to getting there and finding the solution to, justify life to ourselves is something that is very personal, very individual. But when we take the time to communicate with other people in our close knit tribes or, just on the streets, it adds a bigger vocabulary to help us really tease out what it is that the meaning of our life really is.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where along my journey, the mindful aspect of things really started to take root. See, for me, I had to face that question and put the fear down after my second divorce. You mentioned about how we go through life, we collect all these titles and all these different roles in life that can be taken away from us. And in that particular moment, when I had to face that question, that was when that first really resonated with me. That everything that we're doing and throughout our journey, it can be taken away. There is that idea of everything is just outright temporary. So, in order to find the meaning and the inspiration to go on to start the next chapter of your life, I think you really got to learn to make peace with that. And you got to be open to all the resources that are around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that once you realize the transient reality of your life, it's really easier to comprehend this concept because eventually we all die. So our life, by definition, is limited by time. So it doesn't matter
Mhm.
what kind of personality you would identify yourself with, or what kind of title you have. I mean, if you were once young and beautiful, at a certain point in your life, you will be old and your skin will be decaying, and and if you were once very powerful and fierce, someday you will be powerless and you will need the help of others. So if you hold strong to any identity you collect along the way, you are bound to fall on your face at a certain point. And this is why when you realize the transient nature of your life or your journey, by just understanding that someday you're going to die, it prompts you to accept and basically say yes to any experience that comes your way. And this is, in essence, mindfulness. It's being mindful of the situation without resistance, without saying no. So if someone were a religious person, I would suggest, if a person resists the situation, I would say, why are you um, trying to change God's plans for you? Do you think you're better or smarter? It's just to kind of get the point across, right? So I think that everything we face in in our life, in our journey. We need to accept it. We have a lot to learn from it. And in many ways, it's beautiful. And a lot of time when you reflect back on things you had, things you experienced in your life, you find that things that you were afraid of turned out eventually to be the most amazing things that happened to you. And things you were welcoming at the time turned out to be really bad. So you don't have a really good judgment at the present moment, per se. So if you understand that your evaluation of the situation is very limited and it unfolds as you grow along the way, then you can release it, not cling to it, and just accept it. And I think that that alone could help a lot of people in a lot of situations.
And one situation that really comes to mind where mindfulness has really been extremely impactful along my growth is discovering the idea of not only understanding what forgiveness truly means, but also the idea of letting things come and letting things go. So the idea of we carry things for X amount of time. And regardless of how those things leave our lives, whether it's people or it's materialistical things, making peace with the fact that the journey has now come to a fork and you've gone a separate way, I think is one of the most powerful exercises that all of my time in the wilderness with under the lenses of a mindfulness and meditative practice have really taught me. And I think that, as we go through life and we go from that stage where we had the strength, we had the power, the confidence, because we've, I guess, collected the things that we think we're chasing, only to eventually lose them and go through the next cycle of life where we do start to have to depend on different things. I think it makes it an easier transition.
Yeah, and I think that what you said about making peace, it's a great idea. It's a good way to define what forgiveness is, really. So a lot of people, I feel, forgive to get a one up on the other person they're forgiving, or to feel better about themselves. I'm the better man here, or I'm more morally just than you, or I'm more patient than you. These are a lot of underlying reasons for um, what people usually call forgiveness. And I believe that forgiveness is, like you said, it's making peace, not because you are the better man, or not because uh, any other reason, but just because. Just because the other alternative, which is not forgiving, doesn't serve you in any way. It gives you nothing. It gives you anger, it gives you frustration, it gives you self-righteous claims. And those self-righteous claims could be, 100% true, and still it gives you nothing. So the real reason to forgive or to make peace is no reason at all. And this is the basis of true forgiving. And the funny thing is, when you do that, and from my experience of life, it kind of, cleans you like cleaning up your room. You're making space, because the energy you were wasting on holding back on some of conflicts or some of the frustrations you might have in your life, or situations you are still maybe ashamed of, or people you're angry with, all of these is taking room. It's like a mental room, but it's still a room, because our minds are limited. There's so much information we can deal with and so much energy we have. So once you forgive, you're doing yourself an amazing favor. So in other words, forgiveness, true forgiveness, might be a bit selfish, but in a good way. So yeah.
See, and in that good way, it brings to mind how we talked earlier about using the resources around us. Because, as a sportsman, there's over here in North America, we have what's called the North American model of conservation. And one of the most important points of that revolves around the idea of carrying capacity. You know, an area of land can only successfully carry X amount of a species before either the land is damaged or ultimately that herd is damaged. So therefore, that's how we set our number of hunting, of tags and so on and so forth. And when I started really thinking about that, it made me realize that the energy level that we carry, there's only so much of a carrying capacity that we each have. So being able to look at what it is that you're carrying, whether it's traumas or it's anger, whatever the feelings are, if you're able to assess if they're healthy or if they're unhealthy, it provides you with this framework that you can then start to discover ways to essentially harvest and let go, to release and free up that capacity for something that's going to serve you better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great metaphor. And like you said, we can see similarities in nature that implies how our minds work. So that's a good way to look at it.
And then when you dive further into how this like forgiveness journey is going to really go in a way that's going to be meaningful and lasting, to really truly let you go of that, it comes to mind the line from Meditations where Marcus Aurelius talks about the best revenge, or the best way to almost get one over on that person that you're trying to let things go, is to not repeat the same actions and do something not only in a completely different direction, but do so in a way that's going to be better serving for you. So it's not about getting one up, it's about legitimately healing and finding that ability to let things go. When I take people out hiking with this sort of theme, I always like to start out by talking about how, grandmother earth is here to support us. Because of the fact that our backpacks are only so big, there's only so much we can carry. She's here to lift that burden. And I like to represent this by having whoever I'm with, reach down and pick up a handful of grass and then kind of visualize those things that they're carrying they need to let go of into the grass. And after a few minutes or few seconds, putting it back down, and it visualizes it. It brings out that metaphor. And a lot of the philosophies that I apply to the wilderness practices are built off of metaphors just as much as they're built off of the storytelling, because it's a very powerful thing that each of us can easily connect with.
Absolutely. And I touched on the exact same point in my book, where I said that the best ways to convey complex ideas are by storytelling and metaphors. These are the only way, because if you think about it, um, our language is a system where we communicate, but the system is limited in its way, because what I have in my mind, I'm trying to communicate through a system of sounds that then travels into your ears. And every word you hear and every tone, you interpret it in your own way from your own biases. So basically what we're doing, we're exchanging words, but no one knows really what the other one means. So we have to take it into consideration when we are thinking about this way of communication. So really, I think what people doing when they're speaking are and taking too much weight and emphasis on the meaning of the words themselves. It's very confusing. That's why metaphors are transcending the mundane meaning of words to try to point out to something else. It's like the finger that is pointing to the moon. So metaphors and storytelling is really an art. And if you're really good at it, you might be a good philosopher and an artist, and you might help other people see what they're missing. You cannot do it with plain words. I mean, most of the time, at least.
It's that connection within that ability to storytell, though, that we all have, because we all do it when we gather around, say, like a barbecue, or we're in these different social events with our friends. We're telling each other about the course of our day and not even really thinking about the storytelling aspect of it. Like, for a great example, I could tell you about my drive or my hike this morning through the pouring rain and the way that it impacted me. And it may be something that's completely irrelevant to your journey, but at the same time, there's little key elements in there, whether it's the way the mannerisms, or maybe it's a certain word that's said that just clicks with something that applies to your journey and your story, that provides a new spectrum for you to be able to view and work through whatever the problem may be at the time. And that's something that I've really discovered because I've become open to it in the past 2 years, mostly. When beforehand, before the transition in my life, I walked around with a mask and I never really looked at anything outside of what it simply was. But now, fast forward this many years down the line, listening to your journey, your stories, and the things that you share, I'm able to apply that to different things that I've experienced or different hurdles that I'm trying to overcome at the moment. And it broadens the perspective. It broadens the perspective. And those are the kind of impacts that I feel like in today's modern society of go, 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 that get overlooked and that we're not putting enough emphasis on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that what you just described is what happens when you mindfully engage in life. You become more sensitive to things that used to be veiled, and now they're unveiled. So you can pick up, even like you said, even if what I'm saying directly doesn't apply to you or apply to your journey, you're sensitive enough to pick some key elements that do serve you on your journey. And if you're not mindful of that, you'll be just thinking to yourself, well, what is said just now isn't relevant for me, so erase from the computer. So this sensitivity, sorry, develops with this mindfulness journey. And like I said before, on my own journey, the world outside didn't change. Um, my inner world changed, and in other words, my uh, spectrum of senses became much wider. So I'm able to hear things differently. I'm able to think of situations from different planes of reality at the same time. So absolutely. I mean, this sensitivity comes with the mindful journey, and it develops and evolves, and eventually you feel more free than ever. You feel that life is beautiful. You can appreciate things that usually people treat as background, and enjoy it. And you can look at those people and say how they don't see that. And I think that the reason is the spectrum of sensitivity that just develops with this kind of journey we're talking about.
I think about it in the sense of when I'm out in the field, or I take somebody and I start teaching them how to scout for an upcoming hunting season. there's a lot of sitting with binoculars. You know, there's a lot of just looking off in the distance. And this conversation is something I really think compares to the idea of that, because as we talk through these things, you know, here's this picture without that sensitivity that seems really broad, really far off in the distance. And if you start to tap into that sensitivity, it starts to bring the vision a lot finer, because you put those binoculars up and you tuned them in, and you realize that even though mindfulness as a whole, especially on this side of the world with the reputation and the thoughts that the stigmas that are around it, is so broad. But when you pull those binoculars up, you're able to bring it and fine tune it into a smaller, consumable thing, all the way down to, say, in a sense of time, where you know you've got, I'm supposed to sit down and meditate and sit still for like 20 minutes. You know, if that's new to me, that's impossible. You know, that's impractical. I'm just not going to do it. But when you tap into that sensitivity, you realize that 90 minutes turns into 90 seconds at a time. And then it becomes a lot easier to transition and to build a practice with. And that's something that I know is going on with one of your newest things that you're working on with this app. I'd like to dive into that and really set people up for success with this idea of what seems like such a broad picture is really on such a small scale that it's just like putting one foot in front of the other to walk toward these goals that we set.
Yeah, I think you said it beautifully. It's really not about the quantity, but it's about the quality. When we think about our minds, it's a bit different than, let's say, when you think about our body, for example. You can drag yourself to the gym and make yourself push weights, and the certain settings are not your main concern. Okay, a gym is a gym, a weight is a weight, and that's about it. But when we're talking about the mind is more subtle than the body in a way. It's a mental process instead of what we experience as a physical process, which we can distinct. So for the mind, the settings are very important. For now, for just for an example, you're sitting in nature and we're having this conversation. Imagine we were having this conversation sitting in an office. It would be a bit of a different type of conversation because the set and the setting were different. So when a person, especially someone that has no prior experience with the concepts of meditation, will find it very, very difficult. And you even said 20 minutes. I would argue 5 minutes would be very difficult for someone to just sit still, close their eyes or open their eyes and think of nothing. And usually when you say think of nothing, I'm trying to think of nothing, which is basically thinking. And this is not meditation. This is just, you know, torturing yourself. And because usually what meditation looks like for people who have no deeper understanding of the meaning of meditation, which come from the East, and they have their interpretation of what is meditation in the West, having a real problem with it. Usually it goes something like that. You know, you close your eyes and you're like, okay, now I'm meditating. What am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm supposed to be quiet. Okay, oh, my leg's kind of itchy. Oh, it's kind of warm. Or is it cold in here? Or what about that email? Oh, I screwed up the meditation. Am I doing this right? Oh my God, I'm wasting my time. So out of those 5 minutes, people usually spend 4.5 minutes talking to themselves. And it's very challenging because you find quickly enough that there are voices inside your head and something people freak out about. So that what creates meditation fatigue. And a lot of people that I spoke with, they told me, yeah, I've tried meditation, but I've stopped. You know, I've been doing this like 10 minutes a day. So they treat it more as like kind of a gym practice instead of what it really is. What meditation really is, and what is meant by the Eastern traditions, is that meditation is our true nature. It's not something we do, it's something we are. We are, by definition, this serene, tranquil reality. And in front of this serene and tranquil reality, there are all of these masks and all of these concepts that we have. And in order to tap in back into our own true nature, we have to quiet our mind in a way. So there's a lot of practices that try to achieve that. You have, you know, Buddhist kinds of meditation and Zen kind of meditation, and you can be walking and meditating, you can be sitting. And I suggest that you can do about anything and be meditating, because this is your true nature. And to achieve that, you don't need to spend a lot of time, and you don't need to practice it in a kind of rigorous way as if you were trying to get something out of it, because it's absolutely the wrong way. You try to force yourself, force your way in. It's not how the mind works. You cannot fight with the mind. It's not the proper way. So what am I doing right now is, as you mentioned, me and my co-founder, we released a mindfulness app. Um, and the name of the app is Affirmate. So what we basically do is a short mindfulness practice of 90 seconds. In these 90 seconds, we try to make you forget you're using an app and really immerse you into a powerful auditory and visual experience. And you integrate a personal item into the practice, which we think is very beneficial. Like, say you have a ring or a necklace, and you place it on the phone during the practice, and there is some kind of correspondence of the phone with the item, and then you wear the item, and during the day, long after you did the practice, you know, you forgot all about it, and you take one look at the item and you remember of your intention. And this is a kind of thing that we as people are already doing for thousands of years. When we're going to temples, we're going to churches, etc., we take some items with us and we bless them and we give meaning to them, and this is some sort of a tangible connection we have. So this is what we did, and we're live now for 2 months, and it's going real well. And if someone want to try it out, it's free. It's called Affirmate Mindfulness Tool. You can find it on iOS and on Android. And by the way, thank you for the opportunity of sharing this. Appreciate
Most
it.
definitely. That's the whole point of these conversations, is to put these powerful tools like that out there. That actually, listening to you describe that, though, it's something that I know I do personally, and I'm sure most people do, is we had those special little items, but we don't think about that connection. We don't think how we can build on them. So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to be incorporated into that app, because it's practical.
Thank you very
And
much.
practicality is the thing that helps us to build new practices, build that momentum, push us forward in life. And in a roundabout way, you're exposing a lot more people to this beautiful practice of mindfulness, same way that I am. So I love that our work correlates that way. And as we're coming toward the end of our time together today, though, you got to let people know about your book, how they can get in touch with you, and what other exciting things you got coming down the line.
Yeah, so first of all, it was great talking to you. By the way, that's Teddy. Came to say hello. That's my dog here. Now I'm 100% concentrated on evolving Affirmate to a place where you can find a lot of mindfulness tools that you can integrate in your daily life. because in the end of the day, my goal is to make this world more mindful, a better place for all of us. So if we can influence with short practices that people can really integrate and make a habit of, our slogan is "You are what you repeat." So basically, like you said, it's building the momentum, it's repeating those small things, these small wins, and eventually your spectrum of sensitivity will open up and you will see the world in a more profound way. The book you can find on Amazon. I'll be happy to share the link. It's called Behind the Mask, Beyond the Mind. You can search my name for it, Rudy Daniel, or you can search the title of the book. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can absolutely do it via our website, affirmate.app. Me and my co-founder, we both are really doing this from our own journeys of mindfulness, and we're happy to talk to anyone, answer any question, and I'll be happy to share all those links with you, and you can share it with the audience.
I'll definitely have everything posted in the show notes. Rudy, thank you for taking the time to get together. This has been a great conversation. Been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. Likewise.